Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I note the Moran report cannot be sensibly refuted because it presents the government's own costs from budget programs and government agency reports. The Moran report, which we released Sunday week ago, titled The Hidden Cost of Climate Policies and Renewables, shows that the added cost on our electricity is $13 billion each year, and that's $1,300 per household every year. The government says renewable solar and wind energy, or as they should be called, intermittent energy, is 6.5% of a typical household electricity bill. The reality from the government's own costs is 39%, 6 times higher, 6 times higher. The government says the portion is $90 each year, when it is really $536, and with indirect costs added, a staggering $1,300 each year for each household. No wonder the government stopped providing the consolidated costs. The policy of funding the parasitic intermittents that add costs to other forms of generation like hydro, coal and gas means that for every solar and wind job, 2.2 jobs are lost in the productive economy. Our economy and our lifestyles are being fundamentally changed through decarbonising. And that is really deindustrialising to a UN agenda in accord with the UN's 1996 Kyoto Protocol and the UN's 2015 Paris Agreement. It's killing our food security, killing our manufacturing, killing our economic resilience, killing our productive capacity, killing our economic and national sovereignty. It perpetuates our dependence on other nations, our loss of security, whereas before these UN agreements, we were as a nation independent and secure. That leads to another report titled Restoring Scientific Integrity that I released yesterday. In turn, that raises significant and fundamental questions of the basis for the massive subsidies on renewables and climate. In 2016, 17, 19 and 20, I had 4 presentations from the CSIRO, and after each I cross-examined CSIRO's climate science team. I'll share what we learned from CSIRO's own admissions. And by the way, recently I cross-examined 17 internationally respected scientists in climatology, physics, astrophysics, statistical analysis, geologists, mathematicians and computer modelling experts, meteorology, sea levels, earth sciences. These eminent, capable and authoritative scientists have confirmed the conclusions that I now share with you from our report titled Restoring Scientific Integrity. These are some of the conclusions from the report. The CSIRO has never said that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. Never. CSIRO has admitted today's temperatures are not unprecedented. CSIRO has cited papers that do not show the rate of temperature rise is unprecedented. CSIRO relies on unvalidated models giving erroneous projections. CSIRO has never quantified any specific impact from human carbon dioxide. And without that, there can be no policy. CSIRO has relied on discredited and poor quality papers on temperature and carbon dioxide. CSIRO revealed little understanding of the papers they cited, and that was very embarrassing for them. CSIRO admits to doing no due diligence on reports and data they cite, some of those from overseas, some from within Australia. CSIRO allows politicians to misrepresent CSIRO without correction. So they participate in perpetuating this scam. CSIRO misled Parliament. Let's look at something in particular, one of their papers. CSIRO admitted that today's temperatures are not unprecedented after we tore apart the Marcotte paper. It failed under our cross-examination. They submitted the Marcotte paper as showing something unprecedented in Earth's climate in the last 10,000 years. That paper was admitted by its lead author that he said that the 20th century temperature uptick that they show in the paper is not robust and not representative of global temperatures. It was fabricated. Initially, the author himself in his PhD thesis showed no temperature uptick. He was then joined by 2 UN authors, and that produced the Marcotte 2013 paper, and that's where the temperature uptick was fabricated, and that's what CSIRO relied on. Willie Soon, who is an astrophysicist and geoscientist, said, quote, 2 weeks after publication, this Marcotte paper was completely destroyed, and yet someone as high up as CSIRO to say this paper is legitimate and can be used as a supporting scientific evidence is scientific malpractice. The paper also admits that its process that it uses cannot find temperature trends shorter than 300 years. And yet here's the CSIRO citing this as proof. And so they withdrew the paper. I could go on and talk about the Harry's paper that they submitted about carbon dioxide. That shows that that carbon dioxide today is unprecedented. Well, that is false, because the current 60-year blip of carbon dioxide levels rising, in fact, is just a rise of 0.009%, from 0.032% to 0.041%. I'll say that again, a 0.009% rise in just 60 years. When the gaps in the ice cores that Harry's cobbled together are 1,000 years minimum and up to 6,000 years, you would never see this rise. Then, after they withdrew Harry's, CSIRO submitted a paper to us, Feldman, 2015. And that paper confirmed that Harry's was poor. It was poor science, and identified the same problems that we identified. So, I mean, the CSIRO is putting out a paper and then another paper that contradicts it. But none of the papers CSIRO cited specified the amount, if any, of human causation. CSIRO had not even read the papers or understood the papers, nor done its due diligence. Thirdly, when it all is stripped away, the CSIRO relies on unvalidated computer models based on limited and incomplete understanding of climate and giving erroneous projections. These models forecast that the upper troposphere will warm and get more moist, and yet it actually is the reverse of that. It's cooler and drier. The models cannot understand, cannot comprehend, cannot portray anything about clouds, and that's a significant climate variability. They cannot present updrafts. And yet this is what the government relies upon for policy. The only thing they rely on, because CSIRO has not got the evidence, the empirical evidence that should be used. Models are not science, they're not empirical evidence. They don't produce any confidence levels at all. So there's no validation of these models. In fact, they're unvalidated models, full stop. Professor John Christie, one of the world's leading climate scientists and the climatologist at Alabama, has said that he has closely examined CSIRO's access models and found them below par, as the projections simply do not match what we actually see in the real world. Quote, "Climate is so complex, our ignorance of the climate system is enormous, and the myriad of models have not even agreed on a key variable, not even agreed on carbon dioxide sensitivities." Dr. David Evans, one of the world's top modelers and an Australian, says CSIRO climate models should not be used for policy as they are not right yet. I have done a Freedom of Information search and a parliamentary library search that proves no CSIRO or Bureau of Meteorology document has been given to ministers or MPs over the last 15 years that contains evidence that we are affecting the climate. I'll just go to now the CSIRO's response to my report. Get this, the CSIRO chief executive came out with a response to my report before my report was released. And thus, his response to my report is not even based on observation or facts. It doesn't bother with the facts, CSIRO. The CSIRO's chief executive response yesterday simply recycled his letter to me dated 4th of March in response to my letter of 28th of February. The chief executive attempts to use 9 substitutes for science that are there instead of science and that masquerade as science. He uses pseudoscience. He diverts into implying my letter smears CSIRO's people when it does not. I mean, this was last February, and it's false. He appeals to a name or a brand or an authority in saying that CSIRO is a prestigious organization. Well, that is not science. There's no data. There is repeatedly no data, no data, no data. His comments are unsupported and therefore unfounded. He ignores completely the facts we provided. The chief executive has already dug himself into a hole, and his response is to dig deeper. And we can say that now the onus is on government, which is where it should be, to provide the empirical evidence, the science, to justify their policies. We can also say to them, it's futile for the government because we have the data and it will eventually break. Data always prevails, truth eventually emerges, it will drag alarmists kicking and screaming into reality. and One Nation will be there to protect the people of Queensland and
Thank you,
Australia.
Senator Roberts. Your time.